There is a name you may already know: Sebastian Rogers. He was 15 years old when he vanished. Last seen in the area of Stafford Court in Hendersonville, Tennessee, on the morning of February 25, 2024. Reported missing the following day by his mother. Sebastian is 17 now. He turns 18 this December. As of this video, Sebastian has been missing for over 2 years. No confirmed sightings, no arrests, no closure. And his father, Seth Rogers, a man who has driven over 100,000 miles chasing tips, who has stood outside a sheriff's office with a speaker while the sheriff snuck in through the jail entrance to avoid him, is still out here, still pushing, still fighting a system that, by his account, stopped fighting a long time ago. But this video is not a case breakdown. We have covered those before, and we will again. This video is about something Seth Rogers has been quietly building in the background while he searches for his son. It is called Sebastian's Law. And whether or not you follow this case, if you care about what happens to children in this country when they go missing, this law is something you need to understand. I'm Crama Reels. Receipts don't argue. Let's get into it.
Before we talk about what Sebastian's Law is, we need to talk about the gap it is designed to fill. Because if you have never been in this situation, if you have never had a child go missing and had to navigate the system that is supposed to find them, you may not realize how wide that gap actually is. Here is the reality. When a child goes missing in the United States, the case belongs to local law enforcement. In Sebastian's case, that means Sumner County, Tennessee. They have the lead. They control the investigation. They decide what constitutes a credible tip. They decide how many resources get allocated. They decide when, or whether, to ask for outside help. Now, the FBI does have a role. They have resources. They have reach. They have jurisdiction that crosses state lines. And yes, they have been in communication with Seth Rogers throughout this case. But here is the problem. Under the current structure, the FBI can only assist local law enforcement. They can only go as far as the county lets them. They do not have independent authority to take over a missing child investigation unless there is evidence, actual evidence, that the child has crossed state lines. That standard comes from a federal statute known as the Lindbergh Law, 18 U.S.C. Section 1201, which makes kidnapping a federal offense when a victim is transported across state lines or international borders. There is a provision within that law that allows the FBI to presume, after 24 hours, that a missing person has crossed state lines. But that presumption is not a guarantee of intervention, and it has not been enough in cases like Sebastian's, where there is no confirmed evidence of interstate travel and local law enforcement maintains control. So what happens when that local law enforcement is not performing? What happens when a father is told that the sheriff's office is following all credible leads, but cannot define what makes a lead credible? What happens when the primary detective retires? When no press conferences are held? When the family's missing flyer is not even updated with a current age progression photo, but the FBI updates theirs? What happens when a parent has done everything right, filed the reports, hired a private investigator, submitted tips in the proper format to the FBI, driven across multiple states chasing every possible lead, and the county still has the lead, still controls the case, and still refuses to hand it over? Currently, nothing. There is no mechanism. There is no escalation path. There is no legal lever a parent can pull. That is the gap. And that is what Sebastian's Law is designed to address. What is Sebastian's Law? Sebastian's Law is a proposed federal law, not a state law, federal, which means it is not something that can be passed in Tennessee alone and call it a day. It requires both a Senate bill and an accompanying House bill to advance. Seth Rogers has been working through that process, meeting with politicians, coordinating with advocates, and doing it largely while simultaneously searching for his son. The law has 2 core pillars. Let's take them one at a time. Pillar 1. a federal CPS and DCS database. The first pillar of Sebastian's Law targets something that has been a known failure point in child welfare for decades. CPS, Child Protective Services. DCS, Department of Child Services. These agencies exist in every state. Their job is to investigate reports of child abuse and neglect, intervene when necessary, and protect children from harm. But here is the problem. Those agencies are state-regulated, and they are siloed. What that means in plain language is this. If a parent has a CPS case opened against them in Georgia, and then they move to Tennessee, that Tennessee agency does not automatically know about Georgia. Those records do not follow the family across state lines. The systems do not communicate. To get two state agencies to share information with each other, you currently need an attorney who is licensed in both states. That is not a typo. That is the actual requirement. So what happens? Abusive parents move, and they start fresh. A new state, a new county, a new CPS office, and none of the history comes with them. The red flags disappear. The record resets. Sebastian's Law would create a centralized federal database that changes this entirely. Under the proposed law, any report made to a CPS or DCS agency in any state would be entered into a federal system. When a child's name and social security number are pulled up, every report associated with that child or that household, regardless of which state it was filed in, regardless of when, would surface immediately. No attorney required, no interagency negotiations, no luck. The goal, as Seth Rogers has described it, is simple. Abusive parents should not be able to run and hide from the consequences of their behavior just by crossing a state line. That is a reasonable thing to want. And the fact that it does not already exist is worth sitting with for a moment. Pillar 2. Parental authority to petition the FBI. The second pillar of Sebastian's Law is arguably the one with the most immediate impact for families in crisis. It gives parents a formal, legal mechanism to escalate a missing child investigation to the FBI, even when local law enforcement refuses to hand the case over. Here is how it works as Seth Rogers has described it. After 30 days with no meaningful movement on a case, no documented progress, no active leads being pursued, no evidence that the investigation is still active, a parent would have the right to formally petition the FBI to step in. That petition would trigger a review. The FBI would examine what local law enforcement has done and, critically, what they have not done. If the review finds that the investigation has been mishandled, that protocol was not followed, that urgency was absent, the FBI would have the authority to take the case, not just assist, take it. And the local agency that dropped the ball would be held accountable for that. This is a significant departure from how things currently work. Right now, if you believe your local law enforcement is not doing their job, your options are limited. You can call the FBI yourself, and the FBI can take your tips, open their own parallel inquiry, assist when asked, but they cannot supersede local authority without that evidence of a federal crime, without the state line crossing, without the kidnapping charge that gives them clear jurisdiction. Sebastian's Law removes that prerequisite. Under the proposed law, a child does not have to be presumed to have crossed state lines for the FBI to intervene. The failure of local law enforcement to conduct an adequate investigation would itself be grounds for federal involvement. Every missing child under this framework would also be treated as a criminal investigation from day one. Not a runaway, not a wait-and-see situation, a criminal matter, investigated accordingly. Seth Rogers has spoken about what that means to him personally. His son went missing from a home. Law enforcement searched for somewhere between 7 and 8 days, by his account, and then the active search essentially stopped. No additional search areas, no ongoing ground operation.
a detective who complained about overtime hours to the father of the missing child, a sheriff who, by Seth's account, snuck in through the jail entrance of his own building to avoid speaking to him. That is what a case with no escalation path looks like for a family. That is what Sebastian's Law is designed to prevent from happening to the next family.
The cost, and why it is not the obstacle it sounds like. Anytime a new federal law is proposed, the first question that comes up is, what does it cost? It is a fair question, so let's address it. Sebastian's Law does include an estimated cost for implementation. The initial expense, building out the federal database infrastructure, setting up the system, getting it operational, runs in the low millions, not billions, not hundreds of millions. A few $1,000,000 to get it stood up. After that initial investment, the system is designed to become self-maintaining. Each state would submit their case documentation through the division as part of their standard process. The overhead largely goes away once the infrastructure is in place. To put that in perspective, the federal government has allocated far larger sums for far less impactful programs. And with the rapid advancement of AI-assisted data management tools, some of the triage and cross-referencing functions that would have been expensive a decade ago are now significantly more manageable. The cost is not the barrier here. The will is. And that brings us to what you can do about it. Why this law exists at all. The bigger picture. I want to step back for a moment because Sebastian's Law did not come from a think tank. It did not come from a congressional committee or a policy research group. It came from a father sitting in the middle of a nightmare, looking at every wall that was in his way and deciding to try to tear them down. That is not nothing. That is actually how a lot of important legislation gets started. Not in chambers, not in hearings. In the lived experience of someone who hit every obstacle the system had to offer and decided that nobody else should have to hit them the same way. Seth Rogers has been clear about what he is not trying to do. He is not trying to vilify every law enforcement agency in the country. He is not making a blanket claim that all local investigators are corrupt or incompetent. He is acknowledging a structural problem, one where, when local agencies fail, there is currently no check on that failure, no accountability, no next step. And when children are the ones at stake, the absence of a next step is not a bureaucratic inconvenience. It is a catastrophic gap. We also have to acknowledge something that Seth raised directly and that Betty reinforced on stream. Children who run away are not just inconveniences to be filed and forgotten. When a child repeatedly runs away, something is happening in that child's life. Abuse at home, abuse outside the home, a situation they cannot articulate or do not know how to report. The runaway label has historically been used to justify deprioritizing cases, and those deprioritized cases have a way of becoming tragedies. Sebastian's Law treats every missing child as worth the same level of urgency, regardless of circumstance, regardless of the child's background, regardless of the county's caseload or the detective's overtime budget. That is a standard we should have had a long time ago. Where the law stands now, and how you can help. Sebastian's Law is a proposed federal law, which means the road to passing it runs through Washington, and it runs through you. Here is where things stand, as Seth Rogers has described it. Members of the House of Representatives have been made aware of the law. Seth has been meeting with politicians, working with advocates, and building the case for why this legislation is needed. It is slow. Anyone who has ever dealt with the political process knows it is slow, but it is moving. The next phase is expanding that awareness, getting citizens in states across the country to take the document directly to their local representatives, face to face. Not an email, not a form submission, an appointment, a conversation. A copy of the law in their hands so that when it comes up the chain, they have already heard about it. If you want to get involved, the place to start is with Seth Rogers directly. Follow his YouTube channel. Stay connected with his updates. He is the source, and when he makes the document available and lays out exactly how the public can help push this forward, that is where you will hear it first. What you can do right now is this. 1. Follow Seth Rogers on YouTube and stay up to date on how to obtain the document when it becomes available. 2. Start thinking about who your local and state representatives are. Look them up. Know their names. Know how to reach them. 3. When the time comes, show up. Make the appointment. Put the law in their hands. Ask them to support it. 4. If they have already heard of it, ask what they are doing to advance it. If they have not, introduce them to it. That is how legislation like this gets built. Not from the top down, from the ground up. From constituents showing up and making it clear that this is something they care about. Betty said it plainly on the stream that prompted this video. You cannot be in the true crime and missing persons space without being political. Because the system that fails families like Seth Rogers is a political system. It is funded by politicians. It is accountable to politicians. And politicians are accountable to voters. That means this is actually within our reach, if enough people decide it matters. Sebastian Rogers has been missing since February 25th, 2024. He is 17 years old now. He turns 18 this December. The window for him to come home as the child his family remembers is closing. And that fact alone should add urgency to every conversation about this case and this law. His father believes he is alive. Seth Rogers has not stopped searching. He has not stopped filing reports, submitting tips, pressing the FBI, pressing the county, pressing anyone who will listen. And in the middle of all of that, in the middle of a grief that does not go away because there is no conclusion to grieve, just an open question that never closes, he has been building something. A law with his son's name on it. A law that says the next parent who sits where I am sitting should have options, should have recourse, should have a lever to pull when the system stops working. That is the kind of thing you do when you refuse to let the worst moment of your life be meaningless. When you decide that if you cannot fix it for yourself, you will fix it for the next person. Whether you follow this case or not, Sebastian's law is worth your attention. It is worth your time. And if you have the capacity, it is worth your action. If you have any information about Sebastian Rogers, contact the FBI directly. Do not wait. Do not post it on social media first. Call it in immediately. I'm Crama Reels. Receipts don't argue. I'll see y'all in the next one.